Ted, perfect timing. You remember Annette?
Of course.
And you must be Jeffrey.
This is Linda from accounting.
Linda. Ted, you old buck. How's that golf game?
Good. So, it doesn't really seem like a Tuesday, does it?
And it is a Tuesday, so would you please turn to the left and give the person on your left a big smoochy kiss? No. Just a bridge into my theme for today, which is kissing in the 21st century, because when you think about it, where we are in the current economic cycle, there has never been, or we could argue there's never been, a more applicable time for the application of the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid, because it's times like these where those who keep their heads while those around them lose theirs win. Now is the time where you can either be infected by the doom and gloom, peddled by a lot of propagandists who have a lot to gain by propagating doom and gloom, or you can see, as I do, that the glass is actually half full and that there's a lot of opportunity out there. I was lucky enough to be at the World Retail Congress a couple of weeks ago in Barcelona, and one of the speakers explained that the Chinese word for crisis is actually made up of two characters. The first literally means warning, and the second means opportunity. So embedded in the Chinese word crisis is warning, danger, look out, and opportunity. When you think about it, now is the time where we see those people who can really perform, or as Warren Buffett once said, it's only when the tide goes out that you can see who's swimming naked. Albert Einstein also said, as a theory of insanity, that doing the same thing again and again, expecting a different result each time, is a definition of insanity. So for those of us like me who see opportunity, this is about change. And there are certain things that we need in place to make sure we have the capability for change, otherwise we're fooling ourselves. When you think about it also, the word of our times today really is about adaptability. Being able to move, having the capability to make efficient change, being able to do that in a low-cost way, being in charge of our own outcomes by making sure that we have the capability to change and making sure that it is clear and dependable as far as communication is concerned, both within our organisations and to the constituencies that we serve. So, a couple of topics I'd like to very quickly, briefly touch on for you this morning. One is human behaviour in the 21st century and some things we've noticed in the way that human beings behave that is important and relevant to us when we're thinking about things like signage and labelling and general communication, affecting that behavioural change, the KISS principle as it applies to signage and labelling, which is really around nailing the basics, to be perfectly honest, and the power of simplicity and consistency. I'll start with human behaviour in the 21st century. A lot of research has been done in this particular area. We've learnt more about the human body, human physiology and human behaviour in the last 10 years than we have in the rest of civilization. And that's because of our ability now to map the brain and actually look at what happens in terms of stimulus. Yale University's done a lot of research over the last 10 years, and the way that they've put it together is to describe two systems that we act under. One is System 1, which is about the emotional, the subconscious elements of our decision making. Blink, reflex, first impressions, very, very emotional, very impulsive. The second system is one where we put things within a context. We look at trade-offs, we look at the total view, we consider it. It's much more rational and much more conscious. And as evolved human beings, our egos would like to say that we combine these two things in perfect harmony to reach a decision that fulfills our emotional needs and covers off our rational consciousness. But what they've found in research over a 10-year period is that in times of crisis, in times of stress, and when our moods are under pressure, System 2 shuts down and we become far more impulsive. A lot of their research was done in the retail field, which is my specialty, and in that particular area what they've said is up to 72% of purchase decisions are actually made by impulse under subconscious triggers at the shelf face at the last moment. Now when you think about the application of this both to our staff and to the people that we are trying to get a behavioural outcome out of, it's a very important finding. It means that we need to be very, very aware of the subconscious triggers that we're sending people as well as the rational, because generally speaking, the overwhelming preponderance of decision making is on a subconscious level. Some other key things we know today, as Derek touched on earlier, time is the new gold. For most people, we think about our own personal KPI being ROT, return on time. What is it that we get for investing our time? Today, we're not really time poor, we're time challenged. There always have been 168 hours in a week, always will be. But there's a lot of things competing for our time today. So we think through those few precious hours that we actually have that are discretionary time, how are we going to use them? If you want me to use my time, then I have to perceive that there's some return on that, either in time saving or in enjoyment or in education or in stimulation, entertainment, or saving me money, for example. We've never lived in an age where we've had less access to information. We're information rich. At the touch of one finger, thanks to the internet, we have all of the intelligence that man has ever recorded available to us. And yet, most researchers will tell you that we also exist in a time of being comprehension poor. For those of us who like motor cars, we all know the term brake horsepower, but does anybody actually know the technical application for it and what it actually means? But we all know more is good. Like megabytes, more megabytes is good. Megapixels on a camera, more megapixels is good, but do you really know what they actually mean and how they actually apply? Attention spans have physiologically altered since the 1950s, and the 1950s is an important date because that's the beginning of mass communication. That's when television first hit. And since the 1950s, social scientists have been able to prove that our attention spans have actually diminished in direct proportion to the increase in noise that's bombarded us. So our natural reaction has been to filter, to push away, otherwise we'd go insane from the amount of information that's being pushed at us rather than pulled by us willingly. So our attention spans have diminished, which I guess leads a lot to the Yale finding in terms of the subconscious triggers and the way that we kind of go into autopilot a lot of the time. Also, people have a lot of moods and identities. We have the equivalent of Sybil inside all of us. We're schizophrenic, we're multi-personalities, and depending on the mood, the time, the occasion, the factors that influence us, we change personalities. We're not a single human being. All of these things combine to say that if we want to change behaviour, both internally and externally, we've got to make messaging simple, we've got to make it consistent, so that it continues to hit people with the one message all of the time so that it actually gets in and it's comprehended. In terms of affecting behavioural change.
Hello, I'm a Mac.
Hello, I'm a PC, and I'm living with Vista.
Hi, PC. I'm so proud of you for doing this, pal. This is great.
Thank you.
One day at a time, buddy.
Yep.
You've taken the biggest step, and that's accepting that our operating system isn't working like it should.
I just wish they would resolve these problems and issues once and for all.
I wish I could tell you it's going to get easier. Well, I'm pleased to say I've been error-free for nearly a week.
Way to go!
Well, I'm pleased to say I've been error-free for nearly a week.
Okay.
Well, I'm pleased to say I've been error-free for nearly a week.
So hard to watch.
Could someone restart him,
Well, I'm
please?
pleased to say I've been error-free for nearly a week.
So behaviour change and changing it is actually a difficult thing, and I have to admit I am a Macintosh fan, so mea culpa, I'm here to propagandise against the Windows world at any opportunity if I can. Affecting behavioural change, really, there's only two organisations in the history of the world who have been able to affect behavioural change that is lasting. And those two organisations, no secret, are the church and the military. And generally speaking, they use exactly the same basic principle to actually achieve lasting behavioural change, both within organisations and outside organisations. And it's based on this basic premise. That firstly, you have to determine the behaviour that you need to achieve the outcome that you wish to desire. Then you need to turn that into a drill, something that you can get people to do on a constant basis and to, through repetition, embed that and turn it into unconscious competence. To build it up into a rhythm so that they suspend disbelief and just get into the familiar act of doing that thing. And then at the end of it, that there is a carrot and a stick, a reward and a punishment for whoever you're trying to get to change that behaviour. That is the universal way to change behaviour and to make sure that it happens on an ongoing basis. Whenever that is disrupted and we cause some form of dissonance, it breaks down. The behaviour change actually breaks down and is not sustainable. So the KISS principle in signage. Basically, it's like a ledger, it's a P&L if you like. On the cost side of the equation, below the line in red, when we have dissonance or, if you like, disruption in signage, it can lead to, at the worst possible case scenario in terms of the cost side, penalties. Above that is another negative in compliance. Above that is dependability. But as you start to build these blocks, we're starting to then go into where we get positive outcomes. Consistency is a positive outcome for an organisation, both for its people internally and for its external constituents. Flexibility is yet another level above that, and a level above that is speed, because it is only in the 21st century those who can adapt and change fast who will win. We know about human physiology. We know that there are basics in terms of sensors and triggers. We know, for example, in extensive research, in particular, again, in my field in retail, we know that, for example, citrus fragrances slow down the resting heart rate and increase mental alertness. So if you are in a consultative type environment where you want a customer or a person who's receiving the message to slow down so that you can consult with them, citrus fragrances actually slow them down and make them more mentally alert. Musk-based fragrances speed up the heart rate and make them more amorous, which is why any nightclub worth its salt has got an air diffuser that actually has a musk fragrance in the air. We know that music that has a beat of 72 beats per minute actually calms customers down to exactly the right level to take messages in better. The Bulgarians used it as part of their super learning techniques in the old days behind the Iron Curtain. We also know that there are different colours that register. The World Standards Organisation has proven that roughly 28% of men and 13% of women are colourblind to some degree, which means their optical recognition of different patterns and different colour combinations is hampered. We know that the perfect colour combination that fits 98.9% of the population is white out of reflex blue. Hence, you'll find a lot of the major signage is white reversed out of reflex blue. So we know a lot of things about human body and the way that it works. We also know a lot about visual triggers and historical design rules. You know, the Swiss did a great deal of work in the 20s around international pictograms, many of which are still in use today and are universally accepted by human beings as subconscious triggers. Anybody in this room doesn't know the international symbol for information. We also know, most importantly, when we get back to basics, and it's times like these that we need to think back to basics, that when it comes to communication, functionality and comprehension win over aesthetics. Yes, it's fantastic to have everything looking really good and really sexy, but at the end of the day, if the message isn't comprehended and understood, it hasn't done its job, other than for the design company that designed it and got a big fat fee. We need to decide the behaviours that we want, decide what it is that we need to send as visual triggers to get people to do what it is that we want to do, and then we need to make sure that we implement that consistently, because consistency is actually what gives confidence to both our people and our customers to act. If they see the same message time after time after time, there is no need to pause and to rethink it. Which leads into the power of simplicity and consistency. To do that and to do it well, that's where we get productive change. That's where we win or lose. To implement in a way that we can put our hands on our hearts and say we don't need to rethink this, that we don't need to second guess it, we don't need to go around and make up for mistakes, means we actually need to systemise it, to make it simple, to make sure that we get compliance and we get execution the right way. We know the recipient of the message demands simplicity and consistency for them to actually get it, comprehend it, and then to act on it. We know that it's the key to activation as well as comprehension. And we know that making or creating some form of distance does exactly what we don't want to do. It causes a pause for thought. And the moment we have a pause for thought, it means we've broken the confidence level of the person to actually act. Now that's really important if it's a warning sign, or it's something that's out of the ordinary, or you want to change behaviour or get somebody to stop. But when you want to get somebody to do something that they would normally do, or you just want them to act out of reflex, it needs to be consistent so that they continue down the flow of activation that they normally would go down. In summary, I'm an optimist. I'm one of those people who believes in the glass being half full. There is never in business any shortage of opportunity. The only thing that it really comes down to is us focusing on where it is that we're going to get the greatest return on investment at any point in the cycle. Now is no different to that. Now all we have to do is prioritise where we're going to get the greatest return for the activity that we would deploy, where we will put our people, where we'll put our energy, where we'll put our capital. Where will we get the greatest bang for buck? Behaviour especially at a consumer level, at a message recipient level, is becoming more impulsive and more subconscious. So we need to understand physiologically how people work and how to send consistent messages that get them to behave the way that we want them to behave. We know that behaviour change follows a simple model, and once we understand that model and we discipline that model and we deliver that model consistently, it works and it is sustainable. And we also know that if we keep it simple, in particular in times like this, where a lot of our people need leadership because they are being infected by the negative propaganda just as we are. And we know as leaders it takes a hell of a lot of energy to get up every single morning and pump ourselves up because we have a team that sits on our shoulders that needs our positive energy to move them forward. Now is the time where simplicity actually wins. We need to think through the negative and the positive side of the ledger as far as, in particular, signage and communication is concerned. That we need to make sure we eradicate penalties, compliance issues and the dependability issues so that we can build consistency, which leads into flexibility, which overall in the long run gives us the greatest advantage that we can have right now, which is speed. So, signage and labelling are very powerful communication tools, in particular when they're delivered the right way to the way that human physiology works, and in a consistent way where they continue to reinforce exactly the messages we want to send. We know that they can produce productive outcomes, that people trust them and act upon them. We know that incorrect signage and labelling can do the opposite. It can confuse and it can delay people. It can cause pause for thought, which stops them from behaving the way that they would normally behave. But we also know that today communication must be easy, quick and low cost to change. As Darwin once said, and I'd like to leave you with this one thought, it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's the most adaptable to change. To be adaptable to change, you have to have the capability to change. Thank you very much for investing your time today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions.